What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Grand Maester Conspiracy Part 3, The Dance of the Dragons. And while they definitely did it, but we'll get into that in just a minute. I hope everyone is having a fantastic night, day, whatever time it is for you. I hope you're having a great uh, I don't know. I messed up there. But I hope everyone's doing fantastic tonight. With that, I have some very special guests today. The first two parts of the series you can catch on these other lovely peeps panels. But first, ladies first, of course, we'll go with Gemma from Secrets of the Citadel. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing lovely. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And they definitely did it. I love that. I think that's the conclusion that we're coming around to today. Really excited to be on your channel. Thank you for having me on. If you haven't subscribed to Johnny already, what are you doing with your life? Just hit the button. We're trying to get some of these smaller channels monetized in time for season 8, so it's no skin off your nose to just but yeah, really excited to talk about the Maester's involvement specifically in the Dance of the Dragons today.
Yeah, and you almost can't blame them, but we'll figure that out in just a minute. Lauren's Corner, or Lauren, how are you doing tonight, my homie? What's going on?
I'm good, homie. I'm good. As always, I am no longer a guest. I am a fucking pest. So y'all know who I am. I'm Lauren from Lauren's Corner. I do poetry, short stories, book reviews, and hard-hitting interviews, as so said by my lovely homie here, Johnny B. Crazy. You can check out my channel. You know where all the buttons are. I'm glad to be here always with my co-host, J.R. Rowley. Lovely, luscious Secrets of the Citadel as well, sitting over here with her amazing hairdo, as always. That's right, Jill.
Oh my God.
Swish. I also have a Patreon and a bunch of other stuff. I'm sure the mods will put all the links in the chat. Every link that you see, please do click them. And, you know, click all the good buttons down below. Smash them. JR?
Yeah, what's going on, JR? How's it going?
Not
Thank you so much.
much. I'm just laughing at the chat because it's already like blowing up and on fire. Hey, everybody in the chat, good to see you. I'm JR, of course, from Geekchat1. Johnny, thanks for having me on, man. It's been a little while, at least a week, right, since I've been on.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why I'll probably just make you do the shout outs now.
Hey, maybe I figured that might be coming. Otila Angel, Chrissy of Oldstone's my modern crime. The Principal wasn't promised. OTDA, Bobby Catalano, Rod Dammit, Living My Rhapsody, LMR, how are you, hun? Mackenzie L. Burns. Does anybody know who that is? I don't know who that is. Nancy T, good to see you. Ben, how are we doing, sir? If anybody hasn't seen Ben on Drinks and No Things, the channel's absolutely hilarious. I was in it the other night, and it was a lot of fun. Ellie Mara J. Skywalker, Broken Birds, Game of Theories with Marie. Hello. Really early in the morning for you, isn't it, Marie? Lauren's Corner. Does anybody know who that is? Lauren's Corner. It's another one. Danny McKay. I know Nicola was in here earlier. Peter Griffin, who is alive and well, even on my channel. He is definitely the Azora hype of Channel Geekchat1 because he came back to life. It was miraculous.
Yes, it did, man. Thank you so much for those shout outs. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. First, we'll get off. This kind of all really starts with the first olive branch that I think is sent to by the Maesters. With Vagon the Dragonless, Jaehaerys' son that was sent to the Citadel. Now, he's the one that suggested the Great Council of 101 AC. I think he didn't come up with that by himself, but from this is where we get Rhaenyra Targaryen supported over Lenore Valerion. And, JR, what's your thoughts on that? Why are you staring at the chat?
What? Oh, I was just staring at the chat and figuring out where we're at, both.
So with Vagon the Dragonless, as far as the Maester is concerned, how do you feel about his... I don't know. How do you feel about the Great Council of 101 AC? Was it unprecedented for its time? Do you think
For
we'll
some
see
reason, my notes are out of order. I'm not on 101. I'm like on 103. Why
Oh,
are we
goodness
picking
gracious.
it? I don't know what's going on.
Well, Vagon was one of those few maesters that we do know the house that they came from, and it's interesting that one of the others that we also know is Aemon Targaryen. For Vagon in particular, that silver gold hair and the purple eyes were a bit of a giveaway, weren't they? But yeah, I think that council. I think what we have to remember is that there was never a precedent set prior to this, to the Dance of the Dragons and what occurred, to say that a woman couldn't rule. That wasn't a rule. That men, that women were overlooked in favor of a son. That was not a rule in Westeros. It just hadn't come up until this point. So it had to be addressed, and obviously many lords gave Viserys support for this, support that they would later rescind, some of them.
They would. This basically gets people to choose a side.
Yeah.
And there are so many dragons in the realm, human and otherwise, at this time, that, to your point, they already saw this coming for the most part. You know, Grand Maester Orwell, who I know you love so much, we'll get into him in just a second, but he can't be the only one that saw this coming. And do you feel like this was the last time the Maesters gave them a chance? Lauren? Oh, go ahead, Gemma.
I think it was. Grand Maester Orwell predicted that there would be a war even at this early stage. He knew that Rhaenyra would never be willingly give up her birthright. And then, of course, Queen Alicent comes into the picture. She has a child. This is a problem. And Grand Maester Orwell obviously reports back to the Citadel. So he may have been the first person to suggest this, but I think it's clear at this point that the Citadel were put on notice at this point that this could become a problem. Do you agree, Lauren?
Obviously, yes, because the Citadel's always up to no good, and the Citadel always comes back to House Hightower, who's basically made, or its inception was made by Perrymore Hightower, who is essentially a twisted, deformed person who, much like Tyrion Lannister, is extremely involved in academia and learning and reading and stuff like that. But those of you who don't know who Perrymore was, he liked all these things, and he, instead of doing the normal things that was expected of him, he would go to the academics and learn from them and whatnot. And then on his death, his half-brother basically gave a bit of the honey wine to these people, and it created the Citadel. They've always had a hand in it somewhere. And they've always kept an eye on what's going on, especially when the Targaryens came about. Grand Maester Orwell is very smart to basically signal to them, look, this is a problem going on here. And especially with the Great Council, they're deciding which gender or sex has more prominence than the other. Basically instilling a more a higher form of patriarchy that determined where the bloodline goes from then on out, who takes precedence. These people are you could say these men all have a voice over women. They're not really representative of that. And I don't want to get it too, like, kind of the battle of the sexes, but it kind of is, really. And it's not just the Dance of the Dragons, it's the battle of the sexes. It's like Rhaenyra versus her half-brother, like who gets precedence over what. And it's like, just because the Hightowers happen to have a male heir, they're like, oh, well, this is better for us. But not everyone's going to be keen on that, because they've already pledged allegiances and they've had enough of war, but war's going to happen anyway. And for what, really? You know?
It goes against the grain. It's definitely, progressive as well too. Them picking Rhaenyra, this sets a precedent that makes people pissed off, especially in this world. What do you think, Gerald?
I'm sorry, I'm keeping an eye on the troll. On the chat. I don't mean on the troll.
Keeping an eye on the trolls. If you heard this chat, this is outrageous.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can't stop being a mod. Once you mod, you never go back. And so I have a tendency to keep both eyes on the chat. And I'm sorry, I completely lost where we were.
Can I quickly ask a question that Nicola has asked? He's asked, did Pycelle know about the Dance of the Dragons? I'm sure in retrospect that he did, but he was born 85 years after the end of the Dance of the Dragons, so probably not during the time. But that's your question for today, Nicola.
Yeah, with Rhaenyra though, actually, this, Queen Alicent had her firstborn son of the king being passed up for the first time, basically in kind of history that we've seen, and we're set up when Viserys actually dies, and when Viserys actually dies, and then we get the Gangrene Council, and can
you explain why you're calling it the Gangrene Council, please?
Yes. Well, Viserys the First ends up dying. Seems to pass away from heart disease, if my reading is correct, and no one notifies him of his death. The page from his room goes straight to Alicent, reports directly to her, and they immediately have the Green Council, which is Alicent and her cronies, basically. You have Otto Hightower, you have Lyman Beesbury, who didn't make it very long, Grand Maester Orwell, and they basically let him rot in there until they decided what they were going to do as far as usurping the throne. And I know you have a good quote from
just before, this is from The Princess and the Queen, and this is kind of immediately after Viserys dies, and this kind of really just creates this, because when the king dies, there's a protocol which they did not follow, so it's quite gruesome. A day passed, then another. Neither Septons nor Silent Sisters were summoned to the bedchamber where King Viserys lay, swollen and rotting. No bells rang, ravens flew, but not to Dragonstone. They went instead to Old Town, to Casterly Rock, to River Run, to Highgarden, and to many other lords and knights whom Queen Alicent had cause to think might be sympathetic to her son. So, while they were basically maneuvering rapidly, they left their king's body rotting. They didn't announce his death. This isn't very nice. I mean, I kind of understand where Queen Alicent's coming from, in that she wants her son on the throne, but this was not a good start to Aegon II's reign, let's put it that way.
Well, and it's a disservice to the deceased in any regard. I mean, kind of a mark of society is how you treat your dead, and this is, even for Westerosi standard, way outside of the norm. I mean, this wasn't how to treat the dead.
This wasn't just their king. This was her husband. This was Aegon's father. That basically their political machinations were more important to them than like what you said, JR, that the respect for the dead.
And it has this emergency conclave almost feel about it, even though that I mean, yes, it is all of her cronies, and they're trying to garner as much support as possible, as quickly as possible, and consolidate the position. But we see this very early on in Game of Thrones as well. I mean, this is ultimately what Renly is proposing to Ned Stark when it's time is critical, and he absolutely refuses, which obviously we know what happens in that. But it's kind of interesting to see the historical concept of it starting very early on in Westeros. That the Game of Thrones is something that has been played for centuries, as it were.
You either play the Game of Thrones or you die rotting in your bed.
Pretty much.
And
this is how we pick up the story with John Aaron as well, isn't it? I mean, all these little plays, but going back and putting such deep history and lore into that, especially one like this, where we have, kind of the different maneuverings, but it still is the same political atmosphere that it always was.
And I think bringing this back to the Maesters knew this was coming for a long time, didn't they, Johnny? And this is a prophecy, not a magical prophecy, a prophecy of of logic that they knew was coming, and they were right.
yeah, and before this, you had, Aemon and Balon both dying. And you have Balon dying almost like Robert Baratheon. Again, you have these correlations and history repeating itself so poetically as Germ does, as it does in real life. And Grand Maester Runsitter come in and perform the autopsy. He actually died after this new Grand Maester came in. Is something to note. And then you have Grand Maester Melos. He's the one that reported that Lenora Valerion was slain by Carl Corey, which was a very, very suspicious death. And this put a lot more stuff on the table because Daemon swooped in as soon as Lenora Valerion passed away. He writes that King Viserys I ordered the fire at Harrenhal, which is a big assumption. And he also cleaned Viserys I's wound after he sliced his hand on the throne.
I do believe him on that one, though, that the fire at Harrenhal to get rid of House Strong, I actually believe that was Viserys trying to do it on the sly, because obviously Rhaenyra's children were clearly strong children. And I think how could you not believe that rumor? It was, the pug noses, the brown hair, those children did not look Targ.
They were strong boys.
They were strong boys.
And this, we're still kind of in the Green Council, but this brings us to Grand Maester Orwell. And I know you want to talk a little bit about him. That's being modest. Gemma has a ton of stuff. You're doing the queenly wave there, Lauren. I see you down there.
I'll let Lauren go first because I have got a diatribe of Maester Orwell.
I'm sorry, I was utterly distracted in the chat.
See, it's not just me.
My queenly wishes to the chat that they subscribe to your channel, as you're my liege and loyal homie, and very, very welcome into the realm of our community, and you should share this channel out in this particular stream at this time. But please do remind me what we're talking about right now.
It's not just me.
Well, it's going crazy here. Thank you, everyone, for real. Thank you so much. This is just overwhelming and awesome. But we're basically into the Gangrene Council and Grand Maester Orwell, who was, well,
he was the one that predicted all of this.
Yeah. So, didn't I just go on a rant about this 2 seconds ago?
Maybe.
But yeah, no. So yeah, the council is shady. Orwell knows everything is going to go tits up really fast. Alicent leaving her husband to rot is a heinous crime in itself. Even if you take away all the other stuff, like you're married to him, you have kids with him, you're his queen, albeit his second queen. Your second queen and whatnot, and you having to have a male heir. I mean, that's really terrible. But the fact of the Gangrene Council are like ganging up together, like, right, we need to get this person, that person, and this person. Oh, and by the way, Rhaenyra doesn't take precedence. I think it was mostly Hightower that was saying that. And like he openly suggested that women do not come before a male heir because Rhaenyra was put aside for her half brother, who was technically next in line. Hightower claims that the vows to the princess at the first council are null and void because the men who made them are all dead, essentially, and whoever else is left now were children at the time and made no such vows. and I'm pretty sure a bunch of other people were like, yeah, that's the same deal. But it's, God, I'm so distracted by the chat. Chat, stop it. You're too awesome.
Orwell whispered his displeasure during the Green Council.
Didn't he get killed? But one of them.
Eventually.
That was Lyman Beesbury, who got killed 3 different ways, depending on how you want to look at it.
Depending on who you talk to, yeah.
They're brave enough to speak up in the council and went, this is not right. Stab, stab.
For me, Archmaester Orwell is possibly the most interesting maester that was present during the Dance of the Dragons. I believe that he was not the instigator is the wrong word, the catalyst, the fuse that was lit, that caused or sparked the Grand Maester Conspiracy for me. Not necessarily because it was his idea, but I can see him almost being in a martyr kind of role. Orwell was chosen to be Grand Maester. That's the Maester that gets sent to King's Landing to replace Melos. But prior to this, he was certainly the Archmaester before he was the Grand Maester. So he's very, very high up in the conclave at the Citadel. And obviously he had lots to say about the Council of 101, about Rhaenyra being named as the heir. Later on, he is also the author of The Dance of the Dragons, A True Telling. So a lot of the information that we receive about the Dance of the Dragons in the World Book and in Fire and Blood to an extent actually comes from Maester Orwell. There's, and again, it's like you said, Johnny, there's different versions depending on who you talk to. As far as Orwell's concerned as well, he was sent by King Aegon II to send peace terms to Rhaenyra on Dragonstone. According to some, Munkin, I believe, he gave this very long and detailed explanation of why he had been said instead of Aegon himself, whereas Mushroom said he just pissed himself. So very, very differing accounts there of who this man is. Basically, this guy, like I said, I believe ultimately he died. Ultimately, he was executed. He was exiled. He was put in the Black Cells. He was taken, rescued from the Black Cells. Then he was sent to the Night's Watch. Then he escaped the Night's Watch. Then he was recaptured. And eventually he was executed. And I believe that he could well have been a martyr, like that last straw on the camel's back for the Citadel to say, that's it. We've had enough of these Targaryens and their dragons and the destruction they're causing. How many Grand Maesters have been killed by Targaryens at this point? It's a lot. This started way back with Maegor. So for me, he's a very interesting character. And he is present all the way through the Dance of the Dragons in some way, shape, or form. And again, depending on who you talk to, is how and what he said during this time.
It's like a weird side note. Orwell's name, Orwell, sounds like George Orwell to me.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a very dystopian kind of writer, very much in the vein of like kind of the way the Dance of the Dragons is played out. Actually, I might look into that just a little bit. That just came to my brain. So, go ahead, Johnny.
The fact he survived is astonishing to me. I actually look up to this fictional character. He got his chain snatched as well as another funny thing that happened to him. And both of those maesters, Gerardus, or I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's not to say that they're completely opposing. When I read their 2 different stories, it seems like they're both just kind of flying under the radar because they're both dealing with 2 irrational people.
Right. Well, they're pie-selling it, aren't they? They're hedging their bets and trying to not be the flower that gets plucked out of the garden, right? I mean, they're trying to stay just enough under the radar and still have the influence that they want without putting themselves at risk. Is really what they're doing, which is
they're being
pretty remarkable.
Yeah. doing a high tower.
But they are.
Exactly their MO.
But they're staying just enough in it and enough removed from it that it's, hats off to them.
and we've mentioned this before, but people don't think about how many people in this world cannot read and write. And the Maesters control this, and they can send messages whenever they want without anyone knowing. And I believe, to your point, Jim, that this was happening the whole time. Reports were coming in. You even have Prince Damon at Old Town with a dragon at some point. I find that slightly odd. Do you think... we hear these conversations like Borman Baratheon when he was getting told what was in the letter from Rhaenyra. He couldn't read it. He's just being told what was said in the letter. So are there any other examples that y'all have noticed of that?
Well, there's the one I just spoke about with Orwell and we've got these two extremely differing. One has this very eloquent and well-spoken maester explaining Aegon's case to Rhaenyra. The other is this bumbling, terrified idiot that's literally peeing his pants. Which one was it? These are two extremes here. So if we're getting such differing accounts just from the delivery of the messages, who's to say if those messages were being faithfully delivered and correctly read out? Who's to say that they weren't being changed out? What we do know about the initial Dance of the Dragons, before it really full on kicked off, was that messages were being sent back and forth and delivered, and the Maesters had full 100% control of all of these messages. I do not think that the Maesters caused the Dance of the Dragons as part of this conspiracy, but I don't think some of them helped it, because I think some of them were aware of what could happen and knew that that would be a wonderful excuse to then enter into this Maester conspiracy. So maybe there were whispers, there were seeds that were being sown prior to this. This is a problem, this Council of 101, that, like I said, put them on notice. And I think maybe a couple of them had a conversation, if this all really, really kicked off and was terrible for the realm, that's a really good excuse for us to convince any of these Archmaesters here that are on the fence that this conspiracy to rid the world of dragons / magic would be a good idea.
And a lot of the accounts of what we see Orwell saying and doing are secondhand accounts that Munkin wrote, Grand Maester Munkin. And these could have very easily been manipulated to make him look a little better. Like for instance, him whispering his disapproval. He didn't have to do that. He probably shut the hell up and just stayed quiet and wrote some letters.
If he was the kind of maester that's going to pee his pants just by looking at Rhaenyra, then I can't imagine him whispering anything in anyone's presence.
Yeah.
But then again, you have to think how many maesters have peed their pants literally in front of not just Targaryens, but any lord of that matter, of certain standing or narrative that they've been taught in the Citadel, regardless of what their orders and instructions are. And yes, they do have a lot of heavy control when it comes to reading messages, writing messages and sending them on the low key as well. Like Maester Lewin, where we know he always made loads of copies of pretty much every Raven's message and that he had, because we've seen in a Game of Thrones, at least in a TV show, when the Bolton's Maester basically takes over Winterfell, that he said he was very due diligent and kept lots of copies and stuff like that. So he's not only keeping copies for himself, but he's also transferring that to the new ones who come in so they can get up to speed on what he's been up to. And it's just a due diligence, I can't even speak, due diligence in doing that as well. Just the Maesters have a lot of control, but they're also, people are also very aware, much like Lady Dustin, who's all like, up these grey rats, I want nothing to do with them, so and so. Anybody that is anybody and knows somebody and is just going to a new place for once, it's going to be nervous as F. You know, I'm still trying not to swear right now.
It's hard, isn't it?
I know.
I like AU's Pack Mule's comment. Is that why Pycelle popped his pants when the mountain walked in? Could well have been
Yes.
a fun little nod to Mushroom's version of what
Yes.
happened there.
Yeah.
I love everything Mushroom says. I want to believe all of his versions of the accounts because, let's face it, they're far more interesting. But I don't know. Orwell was an Archmaester and then a Grand Maester. You know, this guy's pretty high up.
But
And I
even
think,
during that time, the successions of maesters to archmaesters, the grand maesters, are quite rapid because of the
they were
amount of
going
stuff
through them
off.
like hotcakes. That's true.
Well, I would say as far as Mushroom goes, no, you can't believe everything he says, but I look at Dantos Hollard from the books with the Sansa chapters and how he talks about they forget I'm even there because I'm a fool. I can hear everything. And not to say that everything Mushroom says, because there's some places he isn't even at, but he gets to be privy to conversations normal people aren't privy to because he was by Rhaenyra's side the whole damn time.
And the show kind of did Dantos dirty. I wish they would have given more of the backstory on why he was such a drunk and everything else. Because it's actually really sad. Like I read that, and I'm just like, oh, that is so awful.
I have to introduce my cat. I think that's a rule, isn't it?
That is a rule now. Any animals have to be introduced.
This is Big Dog, the cat that's called Dog.
Big Dog.
Yes, I have ginger cats. Ginger children, ginger mother, ginger cat. It's a theme.
So I've got a good question. I
Ginger
think
ale.
something, in my opinion, that ramped this up for the Maesters was the dragon seeds. And the possibly not even being dragon seeds that are riding the dragons. And how, maybe you don't have to be the blood of a dragon to ride a dragon. That's going to freak everyone the hell out. So, I know Gemma has a lot on this. But first,
I'm not sure about a lot, but I have some.
But first, I'll go to Lauren. What do you think the Maesters thought of the dragon seeds?
An issue, a problem, a potential issue for the crown and their general control overall. I'm a firm believer that the Maesters took it upon themselves to control the birth of dragons, be them human or actual dragons. I mean, you can take a look at a lot of the miscarriages and stuff like that as well. Any bastard Targaryens and whatnot that could have the ability to ride dragons would be more of an issue. More dragons means more destruction and more magic and power in the world for the Targaryens, and it doesn't necessarily balance the power out. And when you've got these maesters, these men of academics and knowledge who hoarding and collecting the knowledge, they themselves would seek to obtain that power because knowledge is power. So we say, but with great intelligence comes great stupidity, and you can file that under the Maesters as well when it comes to how everything's turned out so far. I think as well they've interfered with a lot of, as I said, pregnancies, and that's where we get a lot of the disfigured babies and so on and so forth. I'm probably skipping a bit too far ahead here, but yeah, the dragon seeds are a problem, point blank. They can,
or shooting blanks.
well, yeah. JR, since you've piped up, do you want to take this over as well?
Yeah, talk about the Targaryen hookers, so to speak. That's kind of how they're portrayed here. They just stick with everything.
Yeah, it seems to be all the rage to have a Targaryen in your bedchambers. And this is actually referred to in the main series that we're reading, and Olenna Tyrell talks about this very explicitly, and she is referring to Maester Aemon Targaryen on the Wall is who she's actually speaking of when it was all the rage to be marrying Targaryens. And that's at the height of the Dance of Dragons, because this starts a cycle. for all of Westeros, where the entire realm is bleeding, and you're jumping on the sides of the green and blacks. But I had a question, just really quick, because what side would you have been on, Johnny? Would you have been a green or a black? And it's coming to everybody else too. So
Black.
Yeah, black. Damon. I mean, Lord of Flea Bottom. I mean, come on.
Bish, do you see how I'm dressed right now?
okay,
The
so all of
Gangrene
us
Council killed me.
all of us would have been black. That's interesting. I had to know that if we were going to be green or black. So it was like we have no green defenders whatsoever in this.
What about the chat? Green or black? Let us know.
Yeah,
Black,
that's
black all the way. I think we're
Black.
going to have a lot of blacks.
we are going to have a lot of.
shits.
Well, it's kind of funny too, because if you look at the list of combatants that we had during the dance, and under the blacks, we had House Aaron, House Stark, House Tully, House Greyjoy, and House Valerion. Under the greens, we had Aegon II Targaryen, House Baratheon, House Lannister, House Hightower, House Redwine, and the Kingdom of the Three Daughters. So it's interesting how it split the realm.
Oh my goodness.
The only green so oh, and John Del Vento, I'll say
Tiffany.
green is a token controversial.
Tiffany Marie.
Gemma, do you have your side chat popped open?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. We'll get. I think we need to ask the chat that one.
Okay.
Can I talk about the dragon seeds just quickly though?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's safe to say that the Maesters, because I keep trying to bring this back around to the Maesters, would have very good reason to believe that the dragon seeds were dangerous. And I think what you have to remember is that prior to the Dance of the Dragons, yes, Westeros had seen dragons in action as per Aegon's conquest, of course, the Field of Fire, Harrenhal, and all of that. But the dragons had only been used sparingly by Aegon the Conqueror, let's say, for argument's sake. And what we had with the Dance of the Dragons was something completely different. Now, this is 2 points, because while you've got the Targaryens controlling the dragons, then you can defer responsibility for the dragons to the Targaryens. So if you are able to advise the Targaryens or able to control the Targaryens by having Targaryens in the Citadel and those kind of connections, then essentially you're saying, well, we control the Targaryens, therefore we control the dragons. But two very important things happened in the Dance of the Dragons that suggested implicitly that the Targaryens did not control the dragons. Big problem. The first one was the case of Hugh Hammer, one of the dragon seeds. He, along with Ulf White, were recruited by Rhaenyra to be dragon riders because they were dragon seeds. And they essentially switched sides in the middle of a battle, which is not ideal. And then Hugh Hammer during the battle, starts demanding that he be made king because he rides the largest dragon still living. In other words, what he was saying is that his ability to ride a dragon allowed him to be a serious contender to the Iron Throne. Now, this is just one guy and this is just one example, but if this sets a precedent for other dragon seeds to start saying, oh, hey, yeah, no, I can ride a dragon too. I should be the king too. This is huge. And this is, if you're controlling House Targaryen and yet you've got all these other potential dragon riders. The second event that showed the Targaryens do not control the dragons was the King's Landing riots and the Dragon Pit incident, because there were no dragon riders present. And yet the destruction was apparent. I know we're going to get into that in a little while. But I think those 2 points basically proved case in point to the Citadel that controlling the Targaryens was irrelevant. It was the dragons that was the problem.
The thing is, too, Rhaenyra went insane. Was that with or without help from a maester?
According to the historical records, she went insane.
Exactly, but who writes the historical records?
Exactly.
Oh, the victors. The victors write the history.
It's really easy for them to cover their own tracks when they're in charge of the histories of the educated world, isn't it?
See, it's said that Rhaenyra's baby was premature by at least a month because of her labour was induced by rage of hearing what happened to her father and the things that were going on. But I would also put out the Maesters, knowing the oncoming war for the throne, and owing more allegiance to House Hightower than that of the Targs, may have had Gerardis or Gerardis, however you want to pronounce that.
Dracarys.
Slipped Rhaenyra some sort of poison, one which would kill the child, but it also perhaps cause a deformity if that already hadn't happened. I mean, she says, they stole my crown and murdered my only daughter, and they shall pay for it. But one would also have to suppose that this is a trend in the Targs as well, like an opposite argument, that giving birth to monsters, be it physical manifestations such with Dany's baby, or a personality, psychological monster like Maegor. Rhaenyra's baby had a scaled tail, but you could also put that down to how it was told and said. But this account mostly comes from Mushroom as well. And you seem to get a kind of solemn feel from Mushroom when it comes to this child. It had nothing to do with this. But I think the Maesters have slipped some drugs, should we say, into quite a few Targaryens.
Not just the Targaryens, according to a bit of tinfoil I've got for you all in a little while, but I'm holding on to that.
Tinfoil.
Really quick, Sword in the Darkness in the chat said Olenna Tyrell was betrothed to Darion the Prince of Dragonflies, not Aemon. Correct. I was referring to the show, not the books. It's alluded to in the show that it was supposed to be Aemon. But you're absolutely correct that it was the Prince of Dragonflies.
But she saw fire and blood in Aemon. She knew what she wanted and she took it, right? Because it is insinuated that she did the dirty with
She was
Aemon.
good. It was good.
She took it. She took it with fire and blood. With fire and blood.
She was very good, as she tells Marjorie.
And it seemingly also Rhaenyra, her childbirth was a lot like Dany's, with the hole in the heart, the almost gray
skin,
body,
yes,
in the scales. Or I think it actually had tiny wings, but I can't remember exactly. With that, I'll try to talk about a few more of the Maesters, so we cover some of them. Maester Norrin is the one who actually warned Daemon and Nettles, and decided not to. Told Lord, it was a Mooten, right, of Maidenpool, not to basically act like he didn't read the letter. So that's pretty cool. Makes you wonder what's going on a little bit there. You got, of course, let's see. Well, Gerardus. Got Munkin. So that's kind of it for now. Wow, Maester Huminor.
Huminor.
And he basically served on Dragonstone. I don't have a whole bunch on him. With that, we can kind of get into the Dragon Pit, but I want to give a quote from Mushroom. Drunks they may be, but a drunken man knows not fear. Fool's eye, but a fool can kill a king. Rats, that too, but 1,000 rats can bring down a bear. And I saw it happen once, down there in Flea Bottom. Little gray rat action. So,
and bringing down a bear, which is interesting, since we have families that are representative of both.
Yeah, I remember that totally reminds me of House Mormont. I don't know how valid that is, but it's very much a Mormont thing, and like how a Hightower later down the line eventually brings down the Mormont line because of like Jorah Mormont and his Hightower wife who expected more of him but he couldn't give it to her. That type of thing. But that's a different story.
And then we do get into, and everybody's already popping it in the chat, Maester Rowley, who was known as the Lord Confessor for King Aegon III. He was a student of Archmaester Sandman, and one of the great quotes was actually from Munkin about Rowley, was during his appointment, and it was, It was Grand Maester Munkin who urged that Rowley be appointed. A man who knows how to ease pain will also know how to inflict it. He told the hand, but also important that we have a Lord Confessor who sees his work as duty, not pleasure.
How fitting that is for you, isn't it? That he's named Rowley, and that I think that suits you quite well.
Oh, it suits me quite well.
Mackenzie says it's your distant relative.
Yeah, you must be so tickled that there's a character called Maester Rowley in the Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, you know, it was hilarious because it was actually Aziz from History of Westeros who first pointed it out to me. He's like, hey, have you gotten to this yet? I'm like, no, not yet. He's like, oh, just wait. I'm like, okay, I'm waiting. And then I got to it finally. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. He's like, right.
The closest I've got is Jenna Lannister.
Jenna Lannister, correct.
Yeah.
Closest
so I guess we have to make a Lord Confessor shirt now, huh?
Mine's is, I think there's a Lauren Lannister.
Yes.
But from my experience, any book I've read with the name Lauren, for some reason, the authors seem to hate that name. And they all either die terribly or make some weird shady mistake or something like that. That's the trend I've seen so far. I've never found a book with my name in it that's ended up really well.
If you guys in the chat have a character that has a name that's similar-ish to yours, lay it down for us in the chat. This is a character from the Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, Johnny, we don't need to, there's a million Johns in the Song of Ice and Fire. So
don't worry about me.
No,
but that kind of gets us into, did the Maesters cause the Dragon Pit riots? And I know we were talking a little bit about this priest dream, and we have the shepherd, this one-armed, basically corpse of a man who gets these people into a fervor, and I don't know, just normal people with sticks decide to go kill a bunch of dragons. It's really baffling to me what happens, and I think you got a really good theory, Gemma. Well, let me hear it. Ha!
Well, yeah, it's a bit tinfoily. Well, maybe. Basically, it was a massacre. So basically, what happened is this crazed mob of small folk, and I'm talking literally thousands of them, in King's Landing, decided one day that they'd had enough and they were going to storm the dragon pit. They were going to take on 4 full-sized dragons. Now, I know there's power in numbers, but these are still dragons, right? So they charged on down to the dragon pit, and as you would expect, things didn't go too peachy. The dragons were killed, pretty much ripped apart by the small folks' hands. Like, this sounds deranged and manic and crazed. Thousands of small folk were killed. There was a 5th dragon that basically tried to fly, and the entire dragon pit collapsed. And again, like I said, that these were riderless dragons at this point. So this was a good point to say dragons are the problem, not necessarily the Targaryens. But
and there's always supposed to be a dragon rider there. And who would know that a dragon rider isn't there because Rhaenyra is paranoid?
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's more to this. I understand that the small folk were up to here with this. And yes, like Sword in the Darkness has correctly said, mob mentality led by a religious zealot equals disaster. Absolutely, it could completely have just been that. But in my research, I came across something really quite interesting. And this is a real world thing. This is a thing that's called, and you can look this up, it's called dancing mania or the dancing plague. This was a social phenomenon that occurred primarily in mainland Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, which involved groups of people dancing erratically. It goes on and on to explain. Psychologists
the flash mob of the middle centuries.
Yeah, they described it. Yeah, basically they were having a rave. Now, obviously, the people in the dragon pit weren't having a rave. Scientists have described this dancing mania as a collective mental disorder or a collective hysterical disorder and mass madness. And there's loads and loads of theories posited of what caused this. They actually don't know. But one of them was a parasite in the water, which kind of created this crazed hysteria, this epidemic of dancing. Now, obviously they weren't dancing, but I'm wondering, is it possible that the Maesters or someone did something to the water supply in King's Landing that caused some kind of crazed hysteria or some kind of unusual levels of courage or bravery? You know how some drugs can make you feel like you're invincible, that and people do crazy things like hallucinogens and things like that. I don't think we know that Maesters have access to all sorts of potions and tinctures and all sorts of crazy things. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility to think that the small folk were deranged by unnatural means to
It just hit me.
cause this.
I think you're not going to like it, though. Okay, so the brain worm you get from cats, that you can get from cats. It makes you seek more adrenaline. And what was brought into King's Landing and all the rat catchers were sent out? Cats.
Yeah, cats.
So that could be what it is. Go ahead, Lauren.
That's actually has a fair amount of historical context for introducing into a large population, especially inside of a city. It's a vector-borne illnesses or vectors being used for a nuclear, biological, chemical weapon. Well, not. That's my background. Never mind. Using biological warfare in that manner. Yeah, not that part of it. But that's really not uncommon. It's been done a lot.
I was gonna add that, and in the terms of A Song of Ice and Fire, I was gonna say that maybe a combination of something like Shade of the Evening, and perhaps a powdered form of the poppy, which is essentially cocaine, mixed with like a special adrenaline, maybe taken from the dragons themselves or something to the equivalent, that makes this concoction and puts into the water, and it doesn't fully dilute, so therefore it gets a more stronger strain, and it creates this sort of fever and fervor and hallucinogens that when people are already angry, it heightens that.
Yeah.
Because when you're angry, right, your personal space expands like tenfold, and if you're crunched up together with lots of people, you're already peed off, and then someone comes along and stirs that pot. You've always got that one troll, and then you're instantly triggered like that. It only takes one thing to trigger you, and then you're off. You black out. You don't know what's going on. And for them to go tear dragons apart makes total sense. But you also have to maybe take into account how big the dragons were at the time as well. Are the dragons...
big dragons.
Are they massive, or are they medium ones?
Big dragons. I think you have to be tripping your tits off to think that you could take on a dragon with your bare hands.
Yeah.
With sticks. Yeah.
With sticks.
In all fairness, though, we have seen some pretty prolific riots down in Flea Bottom, right? So, it seems to be a very riotous place. We've pulled apart septons there. We've had mass rapings of ladies of the court. We've had a lot of things going down at Flea Bottom.
When they pulled the septon limb for, yeah.
Listen, a septon is not a dragon, right?
No.
Yes, a fat septon is not a dragon.
And as far as I'm aware, there was no funny business with the dragons in the case of what you just mentioned as well.
Well, I've got a question for you all then. Okay, so we've looked at the possibility that there could have been some shenanigans involved with, yes, I did just say tripping your tits off, John. Sorry. Where was I? Yeah, the basic. So it might not have been. It might have just been the mob mentality. It could have just been as basic and simple as that. But let's just say that we entertain for a moment the possibility that there was some kind of hallucinogens involved, or whatever kind of crazy Westerosi Maester drugs that incited this. Then why? If we're saying that the Maesters did this, and I say this all the time, we have to come back to in whose interests is this. So what were they achieving? Obviously 4 dragons died, but to be fair, the Dance of the Dragons itself was seeing to dying out of dragons quite successfully. Thank you very much. What were they trying to achieve? What did it achieve? other than the death of 4 dragons and the death of thousands of small folk? What did that incident give them a green flag to do?
Population control. 1, population control. 2, population control over the dragons. 3, take the power away.
4 specimens.
Yep. That too.
Possibly.
Experimentations.
And the
I thought
partridge and a
too, the
pear
way to
tree.
figure out how to poison them.
Do you think?
Maybe.
I think it was an excuse. I think it's a reasoning. You can sit down and say, look at all the destruction they caused. The Targaryens weren't even there. And look what they do. Look at all these people that have died. We have to put a stop to dragons.
This is sort of like the crux of the theory here is this moment, because the Maesters are whipping people into a frenzy and pushing them to kill the dragons and then blaming everything on the Targaryens to begin with, right? I mean, this is kind of where this all just wraps around.
And
what were you laughing at this time, Gemma?
I was laughing at John said that we need a T-shirt for God of Thrones 2019.
Trip your tits off.
The other one would be tripping balls.
Yeah, that's another.
Tripping balls.
No, tripping balls, as in BAWS. It has to be in Scottish. It cannot be tripping balls. Tripping balls.
Tripping ball bags.
Balls. Aye, tripping ball bags. There we go.
I think basically we reached a point, and this was the crunch point, this dragon pit, that gave the. I'm looking at a scenario that goes like this. Okay. So Garrides is not Garrides. While he's been shoved from pillar to post. He warned them all about this. They were put on notice. So maybe a few of them were kind of having conversations about, if this all goes tits up, how are we going to deal with this? And then we've maybe got some of the other maesters going, no, it's all good. It'll be fine. You know, we control the Targaryens. We can figure this out. So maybe a bit of in-house discussion. Some of them more in agreement, some more on the fence. And then we have the dragon seeds. Then we have the storming of the dragon pit. These are all very, very good cases to present to any fence sitters that this needs to be done. Because to me, I don't feel as though there was a Grand Maester conspiracy before the Dance of the Dragons, but I believe it began to take root during the course of the Dance of the Dragons. And because ultimately, this is the crunch point. Before the dance, the Targaryens hatched dragons like it was a picnic in the park. There was no real recorded incidences of kings really struggling to do this. No, they just hatched dragon eggs, and they had dragons and dragons and dragons. By the time of the Dance of the Dragons, I think it's like 21 dragons at least that were being, the House Targaryen had, and then some. The kind of like feral dragons kind of hanging around.
Feral dragons hanging around. Sorry, just a funny image. Like, what do? Do they go down to Gianelli Street and get like a saucer of milk or what?
So then we have the dance, and then all of a sudden, Targs can't hatch dragons. Now, what happened during the Dance of the Dragons is no reason for them to not be able to do that anymore. Yes, a lot of dragons died, but they go from literally hatching dragons every other Tuesday to can't be done. We cannot do it. We've brought in all the books. We've brought people from across ASOS. King Aegon III went to huge lengths to attempt to hatch. Couldn't do it. What happened?
Does it bother you that they dismiss Septon Barth's unnatural histories so quickly? And that it's like something that they use that's a secret hidden in...
Yeah. Because that's... Oh, it's everything, isn't it?
Barth is only a mere Septon, and despite Barth's great intelligence and acumen, he is disregarded because of the methods that he takes and whatnot. But even, as I've said this before, in real life, there's Roland Barth, who is has a man of many talents and many academics, and the way he criticizes, especially literary theory, he takes different approaches of it, juxtaposing boxing to wrestling and stuff like that. And Septon Barth is very much in the same vein, maybe not juxtaposing sport, but very much taking in a different direction to that of what the Maesters are inclined to believe. And they go to absolutely great pains to just dismiss him completely, like they gang up on him, and that's a big issue, and it's a very telling tale. You can also kind of tell that some of them admire him as well, but he's still only a Septon, isn't he?
Good point. Good point. Yeah, I feel like there was a Hightower conspiracy before the Dance of Dragons, that some of the Maesters were on board with this. You can kind of see this with the Alliance, and the Alliance is made here, kind of feeling threatened by Corlys Velaryon and the Sea Snakes, the wealth, and bringing Driftmark and High Tide up. I think that actually made them make a couple of mistakes during the Dance of Dragons. Dance of the Dragons, thus making them have to do something desperate. Because to me, it seems like they were playing both sides and playing with each other. I had to say it.
Phrasing.
Every stream I say some slip of the tongue, I say something that the chat just cracks
tripping your tits off is gone. Like, forget about it. You're never getting it back.
It was malarkey last week.
The malarkey that raids the tits.
When I did, what was it? Truck on or no, it wasn't. It was something. Plow on. They grabbed that
plow
one.
on. That one was good for a while.
And mine and JR's last gen news, right? Geekhead news. It was hashtag totes. So you know, chat.
Freedom.
Totes.
By the way, I'm going to say that every time you do that now. I'm just going to go, freedom!
And you're just going to waste at least, a couple of seconds worth of everyone's time.
Tiffany Marie remembered Ricky Dog when I got Shaggy Dog and Ricky Dog.
That's a while ago. Tits and Malarkey 2019.
Hashtag for my body.
Well, since we're about the halfway point, I guess we can do a little business in the middle of the stream. If you guys are enjoying this before we absolutely descend into chaos, please be sure to like and subscribe to Johnny's channel and to Lauren's channel. We're trying to get both of them over 1,000 right now. And we want to do one more of these series where we have a multi-part series going on big theories. Just as a reminder, so far we've done Grand Northern Conspiracy. We've done South Run Ambitions. Now we are currently doing Grand Maester Conspiracy. We would like to bring you guys one more before the season starts, and probably keep it in the same format that we have been. And a poll was just created on Geekchat1 on Facebook. So I listed the 2 that we have done, but we're looking for like the big theories that take a while to break down. I mean, Grand Northern Conspiracy was about 6 hours worth of content between everybody's channels. South Run Ambitions is 6 hours worth of content between all the channels. Grand Maester Conspiracy is going to be about the same. So we're looking for another one that's a really big theory that has a lot of players and a lot of things going on. But we want to know from you guys what you want to see us do the research for and bring to you. And we are still going to be finishing South Run Ambitions. Just to quickly mention that, and that is going to be on Lauren's Corner, which is Lauren's channel. And we're going to do that. We're going to record that as a podcast, though, and do a premiere for it. That way we can interact with you guys in the chat and everything else. For those of you who know premieres and premiere features, I used to do them frequently on my channel, but I haven't done one in a while. Anyway, so please go to Geekchat1, which is now 1 subscriber away from 1,000 on the Facebook group. Thank you for Otila Angel for pointing that out, and Megan V, who are both moderators in here as well. For pointing out that it was that close to getting to 1,000. I actually didn't realize that until they said something. So the poll is open on Geekchat1, so go ahead and do that. And please like and subscribe to this video and the channels for Lauren's Corner and Johnny Be Crazy. And now back to you, Johnny.
Can I just point out one more thing?
Nope.
Right? Because we're
No.
who's being the crown here? Right? Okay, so as Tubbs has actually pointed out, we're at that point now where both me and JR can get the tattoos that were promised. So
Yes.
the tattoos that were promised are coming. They will get there. When I get to the con, it will happen. And maybe we can persuade some other people to come and get the tattoos as well. But on the gen, it's just going to be me and JR for the moment.
I'm not really a tattoo kind of person. I don't really like tattoos.
I
I'm going for the tramp
so
stamp.
Glasses.
I'm lying, by the way. I'm covered in them. So.
Yeah. We see Gemma trolling about tattoos.
Yeah, no, this entire arm is going to end up in geek. I've always planned it that way, that this was going to be a geek sleeve. So it really doesn't bother me to get Geekchat1 glasses. I'm just deciding on how to do it.
John Del Vento, who I love, he's been supporting me in my GoFundMe to get me to Con of Bones as well. So thank you for that, incidentally. But he's replied a suggestion, JR, for what we could look at next. And he wants us to look at some black stone. And I am like, yes.
Yes. The black oily stone is pretty deep and rife with symbolism.
The base of the high tower, the walls of Volantis, Dragonstone. Oh, that would be 16 hours of content.
It could be.
I'm heavy going to get my gemstone crystal awesomeness on the go.
Catherine Hardin says, Gemma and John Del Vento forever. I ship them now.
Dude, say what now? I missed it.
Oh my gosh.
Where is it? Oh, you guys are hilarious. Catherine Harding, Gemma and John Del Vento forever. Purple Heart, I ship them now.
Ha!
You remember when people used to ship me and Kyle? Ugh.
Yes. Yes, I do remember that quite well, actually. It happened quite frequently.
What's happening?
we started talking shop and business. Well, why don't we finish the business part of everything before we jump back into the actual Dance of Dragons?
Yeah. Wasn't talk about Blackstone now. We are off the rails. I'm going for a pee. By the time I come back, we'll be back on Maesters, okay?
What the hell?
What? I don't know what
I'm gonna go drop a deuce. I'll be right back. I mean,
no, that's not where we're going. No, we're coming back. We're coming back to the Grand Maester Conspiracy and the Dance of Dragons.
Are we?
Yes, we are. We are.
Yes, we are.
After the Dragon Pit, and I know, JR, you got a little bit on Aegon III, but the fall of Rhaenyra, the slow decline, it happened pretty fast. But oh my gosh.
What happened?
Gemma's totally dropping one in her Dragon Pit right now.
Do what?
It's gone off the rails.
Just mute. Just mute. Okay.
So okay, with thank you, Danny McKay. I appreciate that. With Aegon, the fall of Rhaenyra and the rise of Aegon III, the brooding king, as I call him, do you feel like he was almost manipulated? And is there anything you see with Aegon III that kind of stands out, especially after the Dragon Pit?
This is kind of where Grand Maester Orwell, before his execution, I mean, he's kind of in the middle of the manipulation in the realm.
And just quickly, we got 1,000 now on Geekchat1. Abby was the 1,000th.
Who was the 1,000th?
Abby.
Abby was.
Yep. Whatever Abby is. Thank you,
Abby is fantastic. Is she in the chat right now?
I don't know. Abby, if you're in the chat, make yourself known. Everybody's found the.
We are summoning people from the chat. That's great.
We summon thee.
You're not back on Maesters.
Look, it says 1K officially for those who can say it. And that's got one on Facebook. Everybody, just hit 1K. Abby, thank you for being the 1,000th member. We just did it. But yes, the poll is open on Geekchat1 to talk about what theory to do next. So
that's awesome. That's gonna be fun, and we'll get back, Gemma. I swear, we're going back to Aegon the Third.
Come on, kids.
Yes, we are.
Daenerys
We
passes
were
away.
actually on Aegon the Third before Geek Chat 1 hit 1,000 on.
That's not how it sounded when I got back.
What did it sound like when you got back?
We're in
Sounded like
trouble.
you were talking about getting 1,000 followers on Geekchat1.
Not my fault.
Hey everyone, welcome. No.
Oh no, are we doing zany DJ voice guy?
Yeah, like very creepy. Yeah, welcome to Sunday Afternoon Talk Show Live. All right, so we get with Aegon the Third. Is Rose up? Do you think he was manipulated a little bit, or something? Because he seems a little too brooding and a little too depressed for a normal,
Well, he did watch his mother get eaten alive by a dragon. That's got to be traumatizing shit right there.
Well,
even before
is
that.
Is it though for a Targaryen though? Is it though? I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I just assumed that it was all the rage in Valeria, and that's what caused the doom. So, I'm joking. I joke. I kid. Aegon the Third, he very easily could have been manipulated. As brooding as he was also depressed. He was pretty reliant on maesters. He was a person that Targaryens have this thing about coming across as very strong and very able to rule, but the ones that are mad kind of are dependent on the maesters, and it's almost like the maesters are bringing them to heal, right? Is this actually what's going on, though? Are the maesters causing this kind of mental illness? Are they bringing out these issues? Are they slowly poisoning them? Are they waiting for their minds to deteriorate for them to be able to manipulate the situation the way that they want? Because by early life of Aegon the Third, it seemed like he was a very capable person, but as he gets the crown, it starts deteriorating rapidly, right? And so it seems sort of auspicious that it comes to this.
It really does. That's a
very
great point.
I said auspicious. I meant suspicious.
It's all right. Hashtag Newton Spadered in the chat.
Hashtag
remember that one. But there's it would beg to differ that they would want to control him. Maybe they weren't poisoning him, so to speak, but just enough to keep him controllable, and they went overboard with it. Because right here, their main objective is to get rid of the dragons, in my opinion, and you have to have control over the ruler.
He died at 36 from consumption. There could have been shenanigans in that.
Yeah, consumption, which is Westerosi tuberculosis, like it wasn't in the world as well. They refer to it the same way. But I just don't see that as being terribly plausible.
I think it's more plausible that because, I mean, he was such a broken king, wasn't he?
But he wasn't before the crown.
No, I remember when I did my Targaryen Kings series, and I spent ages finding some super sad music to put behind my Aegon the Third video, but they call him the Dragon Bane. The last dragon died during his reign. He wouldn't go near dragons. He hated them. Completely traumatized by dragons after the tragic death of Stormcloud, and then obviously Sunfire eating his mother alive in front of him. But it does state implicitly that he tried everything he could to continue, because he was shrewd enough to understand the importance of dragons to the Targaryens as a dynasty. So he did attempt to hatch dragons. I think it's more plausible that if the Maesters were having a hand in anything going on at this time, it was to ensure that these apparent attempts were unsuccessful.
I can't remember if it was Jaehaera, which child it was during this, but there's a couple of cases where it's directly pointed out that these dragon's eggs did not hatch. And we see more and more of this as it goes on. So I kind of agree with you there. And Aegon the Third is kind of, what if Ollie became king?
I don't know. He's got Stannisy vibes as well, I think.
He does. Okay, so I'm not the only one. So I think he has a lot of Stannisy vibes.
Yeah,
Sorry,
he
the chat's
does.
got Sunflower now. They've got hold of Sunflower, and that's it.
The sunflower dragon. Oh God.
Well, I think we have deciphered some fun stuff now.
I mean, because it wasn't until
Unravel that text.
Aegon's brother, Viserys, came back. Then they really started. It was it 9 mages from Essos that they brought across to use magic to hatch a clutch of dragon eggs. Now, what were they doing prior to this to hatch dragons? They didn't need mages from Essos. They didn't need magic. The dragons just hatched. So what had stopped? What? And I think this is the real question. And I don't necessarily have an answer for it. But what happened?
Bullshit. You always have an answer for
The
it.
dying of the dragons.
Quit lying to me.
Well, I'm asking you guys. What do you think? How did the Maesters achieve this? If we're assuming it was the Maesters, somebody stopped. They said the dragons got stunted and small because they were kept in captivity. That didn't happen to Viserion or Rhaegal when Dany
Or Balerion.
No, that didn't happen. So we've seen that is not true. So somebody was weakening the dragons, and then somebody put a stop to the ability that the Targaryens had to hatch them at all. This is huge. And while they were all doing this Dance of the Dragons, while they were all distracted with the Dance of the Dragons, it was like somebody slid in and did whatever it took to ensure that no more dragons could be hatched.
Who would be more capable of that than anybody?
Right.
And it really does. So the way that they went into the Dance of Dragons, knowing that it was going to happen, that this civil war between the Targaryens was coming because of the way they lined themselves up for passing down the crown, right? They knew it was coming. Way back, like we were talking in the very beginning of this, they knew it was going to happen. So are they choosing to capitalize on the chaos that ensued during the Civil War and use that as a time to kill the dragon, metaphorically and physically, both? I mean, that's really what's going on here during this entire Civil War. And if they're able to do it, then they can control the dragons that are ruling. And then it's really the Citadel that is pushing the agenda for the entirety of Westeros, isn't it?
We've got a few good suggestions in the chat. Andy Burnett says, do you think this happened because the Targaryens watered down their bloodline? That could be an answer. And Nicola Jurican says, the book Death of Dragons could have the answer. I think it has a lot of answers. I agree with you there. Thoughts on that?
I was going to say
Aegon the Dragonless. Think about that. And what an asshole he was. There's my one.
Because he didn't have a dragon.
And he didn't. He had no personality. He was a wet blanket. He didn't even seemingly have an emotion. So he could be the inside man here. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I was just going to agree that somewhere down the line, the bloodline's been fiddled with, or the Maesters have somehow managed to switch a baby in that has Targaryen features that isn't Targaryen and created this problem in the bloodline, or has found something from further off, maybe in Old Valyria or Shy, that could help stem the magic or redirect it somewhere else that helps produce these dragons in some way, or I don't know, affect the eggs. I mean, there's all numbers and manners of possibilities, but you know damn well they're in about this somewhere. Like we need to call this. We need to take precedent. Either that, or the one thing that would stand out to me is they're taking the eggs and switching them. They're making replicas and putting them in the cribs, and only the ones that don't hatch are actually just stone. They're not actually dragon eggs, and they've got a cache of dragon eggs somewhere.
Possibly, yeah. I think Nicola might be onto something. I think the Maesters clearly have mysterious blood-soaked tomes in their catacombs or whatever. They clearly have. It's all about the information. We established this in the first conversation about the Maesters, didn't we? It's all about the control of information. In order to be able to prevent the Targaryens from hatching dragons, they would need to know how they hatched them in the first place, which again is another mysterious question that we have many theories and very good ideas on, but we don't actually know for a fact how it was they hatched them at all in the first place. So, I mean, we could go on and on about speculation and theories, but my ultimate answer is I have many ideas, but I don't actually know.
Let me throw this one out there because it's kind of one that I was, when we were doing all the research for all of this, it's one that kind of came to me. What if since the doom of Valyria, it was always going to be a countdown because the power was actually from Valyria? So as the doom befell, what if that started the clock of the winding down of the ability for dragons to do anything?
So then how did Danny manage it?
Right, which becomes the big question mark.
Yeah.
But it was kind of an interesting thing to play with because, you know, then it would, if it wasn't the Maesters, right, what else could explain it? Which ultimately leads us back to the Maesters because there's not really an explanation for it. But I started playing with those possibilities in my head of, you know, what else could have caused it. And that was just one that I kind of came up with that I kind of liked the idea of, but it lacks explanation. But you know, starting the time clock.
Like when you're mentioning the doom of Valyria, you could take an ecological argument to that volcanoes erupted and caused this imbalance in the ecosystem.
In the scales?
We know for a fact that the Faceless Men have a lot to do with what happened in Valyria, and some would deposit that they actually set off the I think it was the 13 flames or the volcanoes that were there that caused the doom.
And does this bring us back around to Pate?
Yeah, and bringing it back around to the Pate and to the Maesters themselves, and how the Maesters are, and I've associated the Maesters and the Faceless Men very similar to one another, except that the Faceless Men are more about assassination and control of just taking out power completely, where the Maesters are more about the information. And they do as they see fit, but there's a difference in ideologies here, but they're very similar. They all come back around. And they're very familiar with one another as well. Does anyone else have thoughts on this?
I'm kind of still thinking, Rod Dammit correctly pointed out that Dany did what she did with her dragon eggs with blood magic, which is very true. There is potential theorizing around a theory I believe that you've had, Johnny, about Targaryen children dying and dragons then being born, so like an inadvertent blood sacrifice. But this brings me to Aegon V, who I will insist to this day, until I read that final Dunk and Egg book, which is never getting written. I mean, I'm a realist, but fingers crossed, of course. But until I find out the canon story of Summerhall, I will believe that Aegon V did hatch dragon eggs on that fateful night, which is a lovely little segue into what's coming up next, right?
It really is. We'll be having the Grand Maester Conspiracy Part 4 Summerhall, which this all ties in together, and it will be on Lauren's Corners channel. And, you know, she's got all kinds of stuff going on, not just a crown. She has a throne to sit on as well. I've seen it, I swear. Kind of with that, I do see right here, this is where the Grand Maester Conspiracy really began for me.
Yeah.
And you've all made really great points. And the life for a life, maybe. And I'll get into this later. I do think Aegon V hatched.
I think that's going to come up in Summerhall.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly is from me.
Yeah, no, definitely going to come up in Summerhall.
So, any of y'all have any final thoughts? And then I'll let y'all give your little outro.
Well, let's see if we have any questions. We got a couple of minutes. Let's see if we got some questions in the chat of what we've covered or covered previously. Summerhall is going to be next week. We know we've skipped over some Maesters. We know some things that we know things, kind of like Luke does.
Saturday.
Summerhall's going to be on Saturday on your channel. That's right, Lauren? Yeah. in place in the slot that would normally be on JR's channel. What we've done this week is we've just kind of handed over our usual slots to Johnny and Lauren, so it's a fair, everybody gets their channel the exposure. But I am the most excited about Summerhall. It is my favorite thing, because Summerhall is the end of Dunk and Egg and the beginning of the Song of Ice and Fire for me. It's the point where these two tales converge, and I think there is a very, very, very good reason why George R. R. Martin has been so cagey about releasing any real details about Summerhall, because I think Summerhall was the catalyst for what we are seeing playing out in the Song of Ice and Fire right now.
And yeah, and Tiffany Marie has a decent question. Why is King's Blood more valuable than a Bastard's from Flea Bottom? And I kind of have a theory on this, that it's all with intent. The way that any type of religion, even voodoo, is intent. It's your intent and belief in that actually makes it real, to a sense. And especially when you're dealing with magic. But that's, that's my crazy philosophical
I've
take
got a
on
little
it,
one on that. I think the Targaryen, well, the Valerians in ancient old Valeria were dabbling with genetics and DNA and splicing dragons and stuff. And when they say King's Blood, like Gendry, Stannis, Robert Baratheon, they're all Targaryens. They all have Targaryen blood. So they all have the blood of old Valeria. They all have elements of what Fire and Blood kind of very overtly suggested was some kind of DNA dragon human.
And really the only ones that are excluded from having blood of the dragons are Northmen. Yes. At this point, everybody in the South is intermarried to everybody, and
Sarah Snow though.
Huh?
You got Sarah Snow now though. Maybe you might have a bastard.
Could be. Could be. Claire Gray did point out earlier when we were in the middle of the discussion of Targ Madness. Targ Madness at the flip of a coin. Perhaps the Maesters flipped the coin and decided who was mad and not. And to that, I would add, maybe they decided who was able and unable to care for the realm. Well, and that's who decided madness.
In British monarchy, we've seen that stupid kings were kind of forgiven, moronic kings that beggared the realm, they got away with a lot. But then when you look at King John, the one crime that they could not get away with was incompetence. That they would be forever vilified. Incompetence was never going to be accepted, as long as they had careful advice, even if they were dumb or moronic, or they got away with so much, and if they had the right team around them, it was okay. This is what King John lacked, and he's hardly looked back upon with affection, let's say.
Oh my god, the English throne with all the, oh my god.
Don't get Lauren started.
No, I mean, no, we've got 1 minute before we close.
I know this, right.
So monarchy, 1 minute.
So basically, English monarchy kept looking everywhere. I wanted to rule everything, and eventually that didn't happen one way or another through Henry Tudor's stupid mistakes and utter travesty. Then we got a unified crown for the British monarchy, and then it went on to some other shit, and we married into some other European royals, and then basically the British Empire happened, and then colonialism, and then some other stuff, and blah. That's it.
Do you ever wish you hadn't started something?
Every day.
So
things I'll never regret starting is friendships with you all.
Oh,
do y'all have anything going on that we haven't announced yet coming up? Anyone?
Oh, I am possibly going to be doing something very interesting with Justin Thomas. He has approached me to basically talk poetry, and it's someone I can really talk poetry, because he himself is not very well versed in it, but he wants to have an in-depth discussion with me. So I might be on his channel very, very shortly. So look, go see his channel, go subscribe, go check out for all the notifications for that. Obviously Saturday we'll be doing, we're continuing this for part 4 with Summerhall. There's lots of reading and lots of listening and stuff and research for me to do. So yay! Usual, more stuff. You can also find me on Mackenzie L. Burns' channel. I was on her episode club. It was really fun because it was just a ladies' night. There's lots of shenanigans in it, so go check that out. Definitely, she needs more love. She's just as hardworking as Johnny is. She's part of the homies on the wall as well. But that's about it. Oh yeah, and Geekend News on Sundays as well. I can't forget about that. Kind of with my sexy face co-host over there. So yeah.
No, and JR's hair that you can ride a surfboard on. It's just lovely. I'm so envious of that hairline, bro.
Dude, just grow your hair out, Johnny. That's how you do it.
Is it no,
dude, do you see my widow's peak? What do you think it looks like? It's just because it's long.
I'd say that's surfing USA right there. That's some Beach Boys standardized haircut.
But
I am on Pacific time now, so that does make sense.
JR, you got Geekend News coming up. You got anything else coming up that we don't know about, my friend?
Actually, I do. I got everything locked in for it today. So April 6th, Saturday, and let's see, 3 p.m. Eastern on April 6th, we're going to have another episode of How to Con of Thrones, and this is going to be the cosplay edition. So joining me will be Courtney Mazza, who some of you might know from a Game of Thrones on Facebook, the group that's like 100,000 people. Anyway, and Con Snow will be joining us on that episode as well. So that will be fantastic. And LMR has agreed to be on it. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Gemma about that at all yet. So that kind of all came together like literally right before we started this one. So we will see. But April 6th will be the next episode of How to Con of Thrones. And it'll be the cosplay edition.
Oh, come on, but I don't do cosplay, so I'm not sure how relevant I'll be.
Exactly, but I was going to see if you want to come on and say hi or not, or whatever you wanted to do, so.
I'll have a think about it.
That means she's not coming on. Okay, so it'll be Courtney Mazza, LMR, myself, and Con Snow.
Rejection is a bitter dish, JR.
It's not rejection, it's just her politely declining, like she does so well.
Go check out Episode Club. I'll be on there right after this. With that, I'll have Nooners of Locations and Lore, the Iron Islands with John St. Baptiste as a podcast at noon tomorrow. But with that, I will let the great Gemma from Secrets of the Citadel take us out and make her blush really quick.
It takes a lot to make me blush. Only a few people can do it. Okay.
I've done it more than once.
I've achieved it too.
That's true.
Okay, I blush all the time. It's true. I would like to, just before I sign out, I would just like to quickly say I am working on Unravelings and all that jazz, but I've been very distracted at the minute because I'm working on an extremely exciting project. I am collaborating on a book, a real life actual book that will be released very soon. I have penned one of the chapters. It is a Game of Thrones book. There's many other authors that have collaborated on this book, people that you might know about, that you might know the names of. But I don't want to give too much away. I've been working on the audio narration for the book, so it's going to be an audiobook format as well. So just keep your eyes and ears out for more information on that. That's why I've been a little bit quieter on my channel. Just, you know, it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of work, as it turns out. Who knew? So yeah, thank you, Johnny, for having me on your channel. It's been an absolute honor. Really looking forward to Summer Hall. You have no idea how much I'm looking forward to Summer Hall. And thank you, chat. You guys, you know, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. There would be no point. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Exactly. The Maesters did it.